Today we're joined by Mike of TreeLife Farms, who traded 20 plus years in corporate America for a life of growing trees, and who's now helping build the next generation of green industry talent. With fall planting season upon us, we're digging into what makes a healthy tree, why locally grown matters on the Gulf Coast, and how the soil beneath it all ties everything together. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming in today. Can you share with the audience a bit about yourself and what you do for a living?
Yes, again, my name is Mike Aschenbrener. I am the owner and operator of TreeLife Farms, which is a 30-acre tree farm located just north of Baytown, Texas, growing about 135,000 container-grown trees a year. My background was engineering and chemistry, and I decided after 20 years that I would retire, and I convinced my family to move from Ohio to Texas and buy a tree farm. And obviously, it's not because I wanted to work less. There's a lot more work involved with a tree farm than
Yeah.
engineering.
I believe it. Was there like a certain experience you had that kind of led you to want to work more with trees?
I think the biggest thing was that the tree farm selected us. My kids are all homeschooled. I wanted an environment where I could teach my kids, and more importantly, I could sell that to my wife. If I would have told my wife that I wanted to quit corporate America and open up an engineering firm, she would have said, "Good luck with that." If I said, "Hey, we have an opportunity for a tree farm, and this is the tree farm. In fact, we've been on this back in 2010, 2011 to actually see the trees, and we knew the other owner." So when I was able to convince her that, we said, okay, we pulled the trigger and we decided to buy the farm.
That is so awesome. And it honestly sounds like a really cool challenge and a lot of fun too. So, for those who've only ever bought a tree at a garden center, can you explain to them the difference for wholesale and how that works in comparison to direct to consumer?
Absolutely. And it was actually a learning curve that we had to go through. So when I first bought the farm, we thought we would be open more from a retail center as well. And if you take a look at your landscape retail centers, it's very rare that the growing operation is actually on the same site that the retail center is on. A lot of those trees and even the floral and the perennials are grown offsite and then trucked in. So it was really dynamically hard to actually operate a retail while we grew so many trees on a 30-acre piece of property. We also had to find our niche to find out where we were going to actually find that niche, where did the prior owners sell their trees, and how to, at the end of the day, how to pay the bills. And we found that a lot of trees to municipalities contract, Harris County Flood Control, corporations, nonprofits, that was our sweet spot. When you think about a landscape DIY center, think landscape centric.
Mhm.
When you think of a tree farm, think green space centric, where you have somebody who all they want to do is plant trees and thousands upon thousands of trees a year. If a city manager called and said, hey, we have a project, we need 1,006-foot tall live oak trees tomorrow, I would laugh and chuckle, said, somebody had to do that 3 years ago. If you would have
Yeah.
called me 3 years ago, I would have done that for you, but I can't speed the wheel up and produce trees any faster. And that's where the light bulb went off. How do I get in front of my customers and say, hey, you have a lens to see into the future. You know where your projects are. You know what you're going to need 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Tell us what you need in the future, and we'll start growing those now for you. And once I made that connection and built those relationships, it started to take off. Planting 135,000 trees a year is daunting, but when you have almost half to 70% of those trees already being planted for a specific customer, it really helps because you know where the tree is going to go. You know you have a customer for it. You know that that tree is going to have a home, and you know how long it's going to be on your property for.
So, do you, just for giggles, have a favorite tree?
Yes. So the truth of the matter is, would be live oak because I'm from up north and we don't have live oaks up in Pennsylvania and Michigan.
Yeah.
Number two would be the cedar elm because it looks like the proverbial Halloween tree that's growing and wrapping its branches around itself. But from the business side of me, my favorite tree is the one that's on a trailer and leaving and going to a customer and getting planted.
Great answer. So, trees aren't going anywhere. Thank goodness. You cannot automate Mother Nature no matter how many times people try. How do you see the green industry evolving over the next 20 years with this huge influx of technology?
So that's actually twofold. The first thing would be the technology side. 10 years ago, when we bought the farm, if
Hmm.
we wanted to automate all the valves for irrigation, we would have to run 12 to 14 miles worth of wires all throughout the farm for irrigation. Now, with a 9-volt battery, an iPhone, and $200, I can turn my sprinklers on and off with my phone.
Wow.
So the technology and the cost of technology has made it way more affordable for farms to try to automate that system. Um, the next part of technology is that it's not going to replace the people planting. It's not going to replace people loading the trailers. But what it will replace is the hours upon hours of research to knowing when to plant, knowing how to plant, knowing what fertilizer to use. If I hired a college student and said, hey, these are my 70 species of trees that we're planting, could you categorize these trees in the order of the what needs the most water, what needs the least amount of water, what wants the most sun, what needs the least amount of sun? I imagine a college student or myself could do that with Google and Wikipedia, and it'd take about 3 or 4 days to culminate that information.
Yeah.
With today's technology and AI can give me that list within 30 seconds. And I can generate that. And now I'm planting smarter. And now instead of having a 15% culling rate or a 15% attrition rate, now it's down to only 2 or 3% because we're planting smarter.
Wow.
The other aspect too is that green spaces is on everybody's mind.
Hmm.
No one's going to say, yeah, we tried that tree planting thing back in the early 2020s and it just didn't work. We're going to concrete everything and paint it green. That doesn't happen. The woodlands doesn't have competition. Hey, we're the flat plains of nothing. It's called the woodlands for a reason.
Right.
People are more in tune with nature. They want a green space. They want that cohesive environment of being outside in an area where they can gather together with friends. And whether they live in a subdivision that's planning for that, I think that's where you see more and more tree farms popping up and being more inclined for selling trees, not just for landscape, but actually for communities, for green spaces, for the side of highways on TxDOT, for Parks and Rec.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were just working on an article about how even in hospitals, if patients are closer to windows, their heal time is faster. Or even if they're looking at a painting that involves nature, like there is a biological improvement, which is really cool because it just shows you how intertwined we all really are with nature. So let's talk about the importance of locally sourced. What does that actually mean for a tree, and why does it matter so much here in the Coast?
I think it matters why because the geography of where we are along the Gulf Coast, you have a certain fauna of trees. And I know that we would have a bald cypress on this area, but we'd also have bald cypress in Florida. Even though that we have, you call that the same tree, folks locally, and Texans are special. Texans love to buy from Texas in Texas. So they
Mm-hmm.
want to keep it locally sourced and keep it in the family. But there's going to be some micro changes in that tree coming from Florida. It is slightly different. But more importantly is that when you start bringing in trees from outside areas, you start introducing other things such as pests or blight that would be geographically isolated if it wasn't for humans.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are the only animals on the planet that pick up a tree and move it and plant it somewhere else. No other creature does that. If you take a look at the unintentional consequences, blight, unintentional consequences of fire ants, that's what happened bringing other flora in from other places, in this case from South America. Um, Also, keeping it local stops your blight and stops pests from coming into your area. Right now, Harris County is under citrus screening quarantine. So if any fruit tree comes into Harris County, once it comes in Harris County, it has to stay in Harris County and it can't leave.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, and the reason why is because they want to isolate that citrus greening from going to other populations outside of Harris County.
That's really cool. I love that. And I mean, like, it's going to be really well acquainted with the soil and the microbes that are all local. So I think that makes a lot of sense. What are the environmental benefits of trees in urban areas as a whole? I've heard about the concept of the urban heat island effect. What else are trees doing for a city as big and full to the brim of people as Houston?
So, as we know and from grade school and high school, is that the trees obviously consume CO2 and produce oxygen. I had to give a presentation to a bunch of Exxon engineer retirees, and I said, "Hey, I'm a tree farm, guys. We actually grow and sell solar-powered oxygen generators." And it took them a while to figure out the joke, but a bunch of engineers actually figured out the joke. We know that trees produce tons of oxygen for our environment. As you mentioned, the urban heat sink. We know for a fact that that canopy of filtered trees and leaves filter out sunlight to stop that urban heat impact in larger cities. The other aspect too is that I call it the Zen or the peace part of it. That's very hard to put your finger on. However, there have been many studies that say that the thicker the tree canopy is in an urban environment, is that you have less crime. And it's
What?
baffling, but you have less crime. And they say, okay, well, how is that? Let's take a look at the demographics. Let's take a look at the socioeconomic impacts of both sides. But when you have a higher tree canopy and you have more nature, you have people who are either A, that the Zen, the peace aspect,
Mhm.
you have cohesive engagement with community. People want to engage and come together in parks in areas like that. And then you also have the aesthetics. It's beautification. People don't really want to walk in a field, especially in Texas, with no shade in the middle of summertime. But if you have shade along parks, along waterways, it's peaceful, it's shady, it's calm, and it actually does reduce that heat soak that you mentioned for the urban heat. So to think about a parking lot after the sun goes down, you walk in that parking lot after the sun goes down, you can still feel the heat radiating off that parking lot or that asphalt or that concrete. If there were trees around that environment in that area, if you took a temperature measurement of that parking lot when the sun goes down, you're about 15 degrees cooler because that piece of concrete did not absorb the sun's IR all day long. So it's not reflecting that heat back at you. So, yes, they do stop heat soak, especially in urban environments.
Wow. So, like, it's as simple too as a quick example off the top of my head is why we want to park under trees whenever we're going to grab something at the grocery store instead of right out in the sun. You come back, your car is a lot more manageable to go into in Texas if you're under a tree versus being out on the asphalt. And, I have a question. I have a feeling that you must be into Shinrin-yoku forest bathing.
I grew up camping. I love being in the forest. I love being in the trees. I grew up in the in mountains of Pennsylvania, so always hiking through the forest there. I loved it. Um, and I remember growing up as a kid. There's a section in Cook's Forest called the Cathedral Mountain, and
Mhm.
it's a virgin forest that has never been cut down. So it's never been harvested for lumber back in the 1800s. And you walk through there, you definitely feel a sense of calm. It's a sense of
Wow.
peace. So, yes, I've always loved that. Um, if you would have asked me while I was in college what I thought about trees, I would have thinking about cars and not thinking about it. But looking back at my childhood, and I'm glad I'm back to my roots, shall we say. I've always loved trees. I just didn't give it as much thought as I do now.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I do have another quick question though. What is one quick benefit for our homeowners with well taking care of trees?
Well, the shade aspect of that tree, besides the beauty. If you have a large shade in your backyard, I imagine you'll realize that you don't have to water the grass underneath that tree as much. And the reason why is because the tree's leaves are filtering out the sunlight and stopping evaporation from that moisture in the soils. The grass will stay greener and you'll need less water maintenance. The other aspect, too, is that everybody in Texas knows how hot pools are in the summertime if there's no shade. And when you have a large tree in your backyard that's filtering that sunlight, the pool is way more enjoyable.
That definitely makes me want to buy a house and have some beautiful trees. Where can people actually find your trees? Can you walk us through a range of projects that you guys have done?
So we sell trees all throughout the city for the city of Houston. City of Houston owns, I think, owns and manages about 70 parks all throughout the city. And if you're in one of those parks, you're near one of our trees. If you are in Columbia Tap Trail, you're next to one of our trees. If you're in Herman Park, you've seen our trees. If you've been in Memorial Park, you've been next to one of our trees. You've been to Buffalo Bayou, our trees, our native shrubs are all along Buffalo Bayou. And then it's the other incidentals that you don't think of. When Texans put a new highway in, they plant trees on the side of the highway. 225, Beltway 8, the Grand Parkway 99. So we supply trees for all those applications. And if you've been hearing the news about nonprofits that donate trees, such as Trees for Houston, we're a
Mhm.
main supplier for Trees for Houston. So our trees go to that nonprofit, and that nonprofit helps encourage homeowners to plant trees on their own private property.
That's so awesome. This side of the tree business is fascinating to me because you have to plan so far well ahead. And growing a tree to a sellable size must obviously take years. How do you decide today what Houston is going to need 5 years from now?
That all requires partnership. It means
Hmm.
sitting down with our customers, understanding what their needs are going to be of the next 2 or 3 years. And most municipalities actually have a top 20 list of the trees they want that they consider native. Now, what's funny is different municipalities and different parts of the county will ask for different trees, but it really depends on where they're planting them. So Buffalo Bio is going to want more riparian and water-loving trees. Your bald cypress, your river birch, your swamp chestnut oaks. You start going out into Conroe area or the woodlands, it's a little drier there. They're going to want more of the bur oak. They're going to want the cedar elms, the American elms. The last thing we want to do is plant trees that we only have one customer for. So
Hmm.
majority of the native species, there's definitely agreement in this area about what's considered native and what people want for their trees. And we start with those lists and we start planting right now. So we planted over 100,000 3-gallon trees this past spring.
Wow.
Those aren't harvested yet. We're already thinking of what we're ordering for seedlings next year, and then what of the 3-gallon trees that we can't sell, because if I sold all those, I'm not going to have a tree to shift up into a 15. I won't have a tree to shift up to a
Oh
30.
my gosh.
So it's a shell game, and you have to keep on thinking of what you're going to need 5 years from now. So from a round number standpoint, we're going to plant 1,000 live oaks today in 3-gallon containers. I'll sell 500 of those. The other 500 will shift into 15s. Next year, I'll sell 250 15-gallon live oaks and then take the other 250 and shift those into 30s. So you always have to stage those trees out for that next generation, that larger tree size that the customer is going to need for larger tree projects.
So it sounds like your engineering experience is really coming in handy with all those calculations because I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to plan social media schedules 2 seasons ahead. Like, that's years
It's
of
it
planning.
Yes, and it's logistics and making sure that you can find it. So talking to the other nurseries who do harvest seed, who do collect seed, and making sure that you reserve those for your customer. Absolutely. Lots of planning.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. And so that means a tree spends most of its life in your field before anybody sees it. What does your maintenance program look like?
So the maintenance, honestly, is not as labor intensive as you think. And the
Cool.
reason why is because we start with an engineered medium or a potting mix soil.
Mhm.
So knowing that we have the best soil, we start with mycorrhizae in that soil. And when you start with great mycorrhizas and the beneficial microbes that are in that soil for good root growth, you have a healthy tree. Great fertilizer. We grow a 3-gallon tree, and that's ready to sell within 8 to 10 months. So once we plant that and have those mycorrhizas take off and those fertilizers take off, there's less maintenance from actually touching the tree because it has a great foundation. If you eat healthy and you work out, do
Yeah.
you need to see the doctor every 30 days? And the answer is no.
No.
And the tree's the same way. Um, the biggest maintenance that we have is making sure that we have the right amount of water for the trees. Automating a system for trees does not make it hands off. The joke that I would say is we have over 150,000 trees in inventory and everyone's on life support because it's in a container, and if it doesn't get water, it's gonna die. It has to be on life support.
Yeah.
So we have two people on our farm that's all they do is walk around the farm and turn valves on, turn valves off, make sure the trees are getting water, even though that zone is automated, but they'll still turn it on and turn it off to make sure the sprinklers are spraying the right way, make sure no drippers are plugged up. And as long as you maintain that they are getting the proper and adequate water, most of the maintenance slowly falls off. Um, I don't like spraying chemical. We choose everything in our power to do everything until we absolutely have to. And at that, it's very, very rare. If the
Yeah.
tree is healthy, the tree has its own immune system to fight off bad pests or to fight off different disease. And luckily, we don't have that many issues with that.
We humans are just basically trees, maybe a little shorter. That's awesome. So, how much of a mature tree's health traces back to how's it cared for in the early years? It sounds like a lot because you said the importance of having a really strong foundation.
Absolutely. And it's all about the roots. It's all about root growth, and the potting mix that the tree is placed in.
Mhm.
Specifications for tree size and container size have varied over the ages, but if you take a look back at the specification that was probably written in the 70s or even in the early 1980s, they would say that a 15-gallon tree should be about an inch and a half caliper. I would shake my head and be terrified if you did that with an oak tree. For a bald cypress or a pine, that would be an inch and a half thick caliper at the base of the trunk in a 15-gallon pot. That
Wow.
would be a very healthy tree. For an oak tree, that is root bound. That is going to be a root bound tree. So look at your roots when you buy a tree. Make sure they're open. Make sure they're fibrous. Make sure they're not circling and girdling around that pot. And as long as you have that, you're going to have a tree that's going to be healthy and it's going to take off when you plant it. The longer that tree is inside that pot and hasn't been changed and hasn't been given new nutrition from a new soil, or in this case, larger shoes for the feet so the tree can grow bigger, that's what's going to give the tree better health.
Wow. That is so interesting. So, beyond scaling your business, you're also on a panel building junior college courses for nursery and greenhouse growers. I think that's so awesome. One thing we talk about a lot here is just we'd love to see more people in the green industry. When I was in business school, they never brought up the green industry, and now I am totally hooked. What are some of the ways you're working to grow the next generation of industry leaders?
So just as you mentioned, the green industry is growing astronomical. We're at 4 billion a year just in Texas and only growing larger. Back when I was in high school and college, no one thought about the green industry. You didn't see it. It said 4-year degree, maybe a landscape architect. But nowadays, you have trade schools that are putting together 2-year degrees for people who don't want the 4-year degree, or maybe they don't want it yet today and don't want the debt.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to go into landscape management. Maybe they want to go into landscape design, and actually having those tech school classes such as nursery management, irrigation management, botany, simple soil structure and soil health, and putting those classes together. So we have junior colleges looking at putting classes together like that. And now that I have a great team at my farm, I
Mm-hmm.
have more time to focus on TNLA. And Texas Nursery Landscape Association is geared for bringing that next talent into the industry. The farmers that started this farm in the 80s retired. They had no kin to sell or move the farm next to. We just came in and bought it.
Mm-hmm.
My kids grew up in the industry. I would love it if my daughter decided to stay in the industry and eventually purchase the farm from us and take care of it after we go. But there's going to be many opportunities for young adults growing up in this industry that would have that opportunity to make a career out of having a tree farm or having a nursery or a greenhouse. Historically, we've given lots of tours for Student Conservation Association, And every summer we have tours at our farm, and we have these students come in and learn more about our industry. We started this back in 2017, and it's been fantastic that 4, 5, 6 years later, these young students are now working for the city of Houston, or they now work for the city of Woodlands, and now they're my customers, or now they work for one of the premier landscape architects in the Houston area.
Wow.
And like, oh yeah, Mr. Mike, I was touring your farm when I was 18 years old. You cooked us hot dogs and hamburgers, and we saw how you planted these. And it's like, wow, that does my heart good that this next generation has that fire, that spirit inside of them, and they want to be part of it and grow as well.
And the whole part of just like the tree health too, which is really, really important in this industry, and wrapping your head around that. I think it's all really beneficial. And it's just so interesting learning more about your business. I'm learning, wow, you have to plan really far ahead and be a strategic thinker. And also, you have to pay attention to detail. Every single tree gets watered every single day. And whenever it's that maximum amount of trees, like, you have to have these trustworthy people you're working with.
You have to have trustworthy people, but you also have to have that visual inspection. The tree, if they're sick, is not going to communicate to you using words. It's going to
Mhm.
communicate to you by their actions, or how their leaves are drooping or they're not drooping,
Mhm.
and being able to teach people how to interpret those signs of what's the tree going through. If a live oak on our farm starts going brown, it lost water 2 weeks ago. It takes that long to finally see the
Oh
signs
my
of the
gosh.
leaves going brown. If a red maple doesn't get water, it tells you within 10 hours the leaves are droopy. So what that means is Mother Nature is giving us that indication. So take a red maple and stick a red maple in the field with all the live oaks.
Yeah.
So that will be the indicator. When you walk by that field and see that red maple in the pad where all the live oaks are, if the red maple's leaves are down, you know, hey, it's telling you it didn't get water, where the live oak's not giving you that information directly and in a timely fashion.
Oh my gosh, like, that is just so interesting to me. I love the whole concept of plants talking to us, and I really wish everyone would listen. So, for a listener who is simply planting a tree in their yard this fall, what's one thing you would recommend to them for fall tree success?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, and that's fall time tree planting. So planting in the summertime is tough because you have to feed it so much water and give it so much water every day. But if you're going to plant in the fall time, the best thing I can tell you to do is soil health. And with MicroLife, follow the regimen for mycorrhizas in the soil, get a good mediated soil in there, mix that with the clay, and subscribe to how often you should use an Ocean Harvest or MicroLife Ultimate, and you will have fantastic tree success. We prove it day in and day out.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Mike. We learned a lot over here. Is there anything else you'd like to share, or where people can keep up with you all?
So you can visit us at www.treelifefarms.com. Feel free to email me directly at Mike at TreeLife Farms. And if there's any listener out there that has a nonprofit or works with young students or young adults that want to learn more about the industry, feel free to give us a call. Like I said, we do tours, educational tours all year long, and we're happy to. I have three young children, actually young adults now, and my daughter is in business, but she's been running tours at the farm probably since she was 11 or 12. And now she's actually going to be a media spokesperson at TNLA at the expo in 2 weeks in San Antonio.
Wow, that is awesome. Congratulations. And I can't wait to see what she does in this industry too.
Same here. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.